All right, hour 3, Rush to Reason, Denver's Afternoon Rush, KLZ-560. And welcome, Fred Dashevsky. Appreciate you joining us. You are a currency expert and also owner and founder of U.S. Coin Capital in Hilton Head, South Carolina. Talk to us a little bit. And number one, welcome. Thank you. I should get that out of the way. So I appreciate you joining us, Fred.
Yeah, thank you for having me on the show. It's a pleasure to be here, and may I compliment you on your Joe Walsh and Rush background.
Thank you. You're very kind. Thank you, Fred. I appreciate it. All right, we are, and I talk about this a lot. Some people probably think I sound like a broken record because I go over this national debt thing on not quite daily, but I will at least cover it 2 or 3 times a week, Fred, because it's such a big deal. It's ballooning. I don't have the debt clock right up at the moment. I can bring it up, but it's $33.5+ trillion. 33.6 now we're up to, and it is not slowing down any.
No, and keep in mind, that's only the bonded debt
That's
of the
right.
United States government. Okay, so there's 2 forms of debt that the United States government carries. The bonded debt you just mentioned, which are the outstanding treasuries and securities that are held by everyone from the Federal Reserve right down to the investment banks, right down to the secondary market, to the pension accounts, trust funds, and the individual Americans and worldwide investors. But then there is the other round of obligations that the government has that it does not want to count. And it has something in the order of 70+ trillion in outstanding obligations to pension accounts. These are of the 88 different pension accounts that the government has funds for secured, but they actually took funds from those accounts, replaced them with other obligations and debt instruments, but they have to inevitably make good. So it is a monster problem, and what concerns me, and I'm glad you talk about it, because although the debt's been around for a long time, I mean, we can go back to, 1980 when the Fed chairman was Paul Volcker, and the debt was $900 billion. And people were tremendously concerned. But what really gets me now is the rate of acceleration.
Yes.
So what took, 10 years to accumulate another trillion in debt, and then another 10 years would go by, we'd add another trillion or two. By the year 2000, we had about $5.5 trillion in national debt from $900 billion, back in 1980. But by 2006, 2007, when the crisis hit, we had a huge jump, and all of a sudden the debt is now $11 trillion. And then within the next 10 years, we hit 2020, and we've jumped to 26, 27 trillion. But in the last 3 years, we've added another 14 trillion, and that's where that 33+ trillion comes from.
Huge.
So if you drew it as a graph, the rate at which this accelerates is making it look almost parabolic. So almost no time is passing without massive increases to the debt load, and that creates an inevitable problem that will manifest itself in one of several ways. The worst would be, what they call a debt bomb. So the interest payments start accumulating so fast we can't make the payments, and we spiral into a default where we're printing money so fast we can't keep it up. The other possibility is they simply monetize this debt. In other words, they just print tens of trillions of additional dollars to pay off the outstanding obligations. And I don't think the public could sustain that. The inflation numbers would just skyrocket.
You're hyperinflation when that happens, right?
Absolutely. And, what's the only positive thing in the last couple of years is they've hidden this inflation problem and this debt situation for decades. But the past couple of years, the inflation numbers were so large, they impacted so many things that people actually see in their everyday life.
Right.
The anecdotal information coming from people about, dropping off at a supermarket, a couple $100 and walking away with a bag of food, it's something people see now. And I'm concerned that if people are not denominating a portion of their wealth in something outside of paper money,
right,
and they're counting on the way that life used to be, where you could, store the value of your wealth in paper exclusively, they're going to experience a fundamental problem. And this flaw in our monetary system of being able to print money when a government is deficit spending at record levels and showing no signs of slowing down, it is really becoming problematic.
No, I agree. And I guess you just said a moment ago, one of the ways to deal with this is, of course, the printing of tens of trillions of dollars, which then gives us hyperinflation. What other ways are there to deal with this?
Well, you could allow the debt bomb to just simply spiral out of control and go into a default. This would probably be the worst case scenario. So imagine the United States government turns to you or any other bondholder and says, sorry, thank you for giving us your investment capital. We can't make good on the bond obligation. So we go into default. We start looking like Argentina or Greece.
Right.
And then, of course, our value of the currency around the world would just plummet. And this is the biggest problem that we face, is this de-dollarization issue, where if there isn't sustained confidence around the world in the U.S. dollar, we face a perpetual problem that would really devastate the U.S. economy. The only other option that used to exist, and it would have been viable maybe up to 5 years ago, 10 years ago, I mean, I'm pushing the envelope a little bit there, government could have said, we're going to do two things simultaneously, just like an individual. You know, if you're spending more money than you're bringing in, you need to reduce your spending.
Put the brakes on.
Raise one or the other, right?
Yep.
Raise your income.
Or both.
Spending, both. Okay.
Yeah, go get a second job and stop spending.
Exactly. Or at least stop spending more than you're bringing in.
Correct.
But so the government faced that issue, but we've gotten to a point now where the size of this problem is so vastly large, they can't cut enough government spending to reduce the bleeding, nor can they go the other way and raise enough revenue, which would mean increasing your taxes by such a vast amount to cover this gap. The problem is way too big for either of those to become a solution anymore. There is, in my opinion, nothing left but the two possibilities. The monetization.
I mean, and you're more of an expert at this than I, but some of the other things I see you could do. Number one, you got to stimulate the economy. That always raises revenue because the more people are out spending and doing things in businesses and so on, you know, the income tax revenues grow from that. Granted, you're not going to get $33.6 trillion in doing that, but you could help in that manner. Natural resources, which by the way, any nation, the only way to really pay debt off, Fred, is you've got to do something with the natural resources that you have. In this case, in our country, that's coal, natural gas, oil, those sorts of things. Exactly. You know, lithium. You know, there's been lithium mine. Lithium deposits have been found now in this country. I mean, there's ways to do that as well, which, by the way, we're not tapping into. Now, are all of those combined ways to, handle $33.6 trillion? No, you've got to do all of that and cut spending and probably have some tax increases along the way. As much as I hate saying that, you got to have a little, and I'm not saying that across the board, you got to be selective in how you make that happen. But at the end of the day, you've got to raise revenue, you've got to cut spending, and you've got to handle the natural resources as a way of income at the same time. Problem is, we don't have a White House willing to do any of the things I just mentioned.
No, and I think it's politically very difficult for any politician, especially in an election year, to tell the public, I'm going to have to raise your taxes and cut spending on goods and services and things that you're used to getting. I find that politically very difficult.
Oh, it's suicide. You can't do it. You're 100%. That's why no one ever wants, even though it needs to be touched, nobody wants to mess with Social Security or Medicare.
Absolutely, because it becomes, they used to call it the third rail of politics.
That's right.
So no one wants to tell the voting public, the majority of the voting public, that they're going to get a reduction in government bailout money. And whether or not we can grow our way out of the economy, I mean, the Keynesian concept of, yes, the economy grows sufficiently and absorbs the debt. Well, that works if you're not printing trillions of dollars a year. If the debt was a limited amount in the hundreds of billions or tens of billions, I believe you're right. You could effectively grow an economy enough to where you could absorb. But I don't think we're there anymore.
Fred, I would tell you is even if we were 10 trillion or below, I think we could do that. But no, not at 33.6. We can't.
No, the percentage of the GDP that's represented by the interest payments on the debt is now becoming so alarming.
Correct.
That people are really getting very concerned about the ability of the government to sustain this. Even the chairman of the Federal Reserve has used the word unsustainable numerous times in his outlook about the rate at which the government is blowing through money and the fact that he doesn't foresee the ability of them to lower rates enough, to stimulate economic activity enough to get this economy moving forward. I'm just convinced that the paper value of money is going to end up being significantly inflated and at a pace that most people are not prepared for. It's really why I've been such a strong advocate of what I've been doing for 40 years, physical gold and silver coins.
Okay, so let's follow up and kind of end with that. How would they protect themselves against this? What are the ways to hedge against it? And, and by the way, these are for folks that in some cases may have the ability to buy some or may not. They may have to make some changes in their overall budget to be able to do that. What is the answers there?
Well, I think diversification is the key. So, in the 50s and 60s, I think if people planned a retirement portfolio that existed exclusively with paper money, whether that be stocks or bonds or accumulation of different assets like that, that was fine. I think in the modern era, it just requires that people diversify. In other words, I'm not one of those people who believe in the doom and gloom of America or the doom and gloom of the dollar. As much as I foresee these problems, I think we're going to find a solution. It will probably be printing the money, but we will survive this. But for individuals, they need to recognize the flaw and protect their wealth by diversifying at least a portion into something physical that will actually appreciate as paper money loses more value. If they don't, then they're just subject to standing on the train tracks watching the train come at them and not stepping off to the side.
Makes sense. All right, if they want to do something along these lines, how do they get a hold of you, Fred?
Well, we've been educating people on how to do this for 40 years, and we'll be happy to talk with people about a proper method of physical accumulation of gold and silver. They can reach us directly, 800-878-2646. That's 800-878-COIN for those that like that. Our website is US Coin Capital, and capital spelled like the building, CAPITOL, US Coin Capital. And we'll be happy to help people, walk them through the process of how to do this. For those that are able to, I think it's essential at this point to do so.
Fred, I appreciate it. And again, thank you for being flexible with us today. I had your time off. That was on me, not your booking agent. I screwed up. My bad. But thank you for being flexible. I appreciate it very much, sir.
My pleasure. Always happy to be with you. And I want to continue to encourage you to keep talking about the debt. You may feel as if you're being redundant, but I think it's an issue that people need to recognize.
All right. I will do it, Fred. Thank you for that. I appreciate it, sir, very much.
Best of luck.
You bet. Have a great night. Thank you very much, Fred. And again, that number was 1-800-878-COIN.